So if you're not understanding the full spectrum of your business, what your profits and losses are, what your services are, really digging into the nitty gritty of what point are you breaking even, you're not really running your business. You could be self-employed and you're working, right? But running a business is when your business can run without you, right? So I think there's a lot to be said around like mentorship, understanding the industry is a different beast in itself, but knowing and understanding business and how to be a successful business is key. And this goes back to my comment around like you can have all the certifications in the world, but if you don't understand the game and how to build your business, what good is it?
There he is.
Hey, what do you say, man?
How you doing, boss?
I'm doing good. Well, hello.
Hey, welcome.
Hello, hello. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Wow, look at this place. It's nice and warm in here too.
I know.
Oh
We
my
just
goodness.
kicked it on. We got a pretty good HVAC system, so it kicks on pretty quick.
Wow,
Yeah, it's like a commercial grade, so Liz could tell you a little bit more about that. But,
absolutely.
yeah, but welcome. So this is the Design Build Green Hub. The property is roughly about 120 years old. And
Wow.
so when we acquired the property, they actually were looking for a contractor to come in and try to resolve the foundation issue because the house was sinking.
Literally sinking.
Literally sinking.
Okay.
Yep. And so, the neighborhood had kind of been struggling, and the manhole was plugged up for many years, and so the city was just plowing the snow, and it was getting flooded, and everything was flooding into hitting the basement.
Okay.
So slowly over the years, it probably had been blighted for about 10 years
Wow.
before we had picked it up.
Okay.
But the cool thing is that they weren't interested in investing in the property. It was before Ford had even announced, which is super cool because we get like a really good view of the train
Absolutely.
station. So we really, God really blessed us in that aspect because we had no clue that was even coming.
So who'd you
But-
get the property from?
So the property had been owned by the same family for 2 generations. It was a Mexican family that came to Detroit in the 1930s for work like everybody else.
Wow.
And so there was 4 sons and 1 daughter, and basically they had went off to war. They served as Korean War veterans, and they put their money together and they purchased the property for their parents. And then they raised all of their siblings. Then it was passed down to the sister and then her son. And so I think what's special about this place is because it really is not just about the building, I tell people, but it's about the history of our neighborhood. So you're in Southwest Detroit. This is the Hubbard-Richard community, which was heavily populated with the Latino population that had really stabilized District 6 or Southwest Detroit,
Absolutely.
Mexican town for many, many years
Yeah.
when Detroit was really going through a downturn.
So what about the other homes in this area? Can you talk a little bit about the history regarding that?
This is one of the last standing like historical houses that is roughly about 120 years old. But if you look outside, you can see scattered housing. And so those housing was developed in the late 90s by Bagley Housing Association, which came in and seeing there was just a lot of desolate vacant land. The developer is now 70-something years old. He still comes to this day and he gardens this little garden here.
Nice.
And then he also realized that in order to have community, we needed to have a park, school, so that kids could feel safe. And so he actually raised additional funds to build Stanton Park as well.
Oh wow, that's nice.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
we still see him to this day. He's still around. A lot of people don't know who he is. There's a lot of newcomers. So
Nice.
it's pretty cool. So I can tell you a little bit about the work. I think what's also really unique about the intentional work that we did with the hub was that we used all local subcontractors.
Nice.
So we were struggling to find subs just like everybody else. So we intentionally decided to hire 3-4 subcontractors from the neighborhood, all had different skill sets, and they all kind of committed to the project. And then we ended up actually launching kind of a pilot of like what could hands-on training look like for growing, aspiring contractors.
Nice.
So everything you see was done by subs that were from the community. Everything was a gut. So we did everything from the windows to the siding to the foundation, to the basement to flooring. Everything you see has been kind of retouched. The only thing we were able to save was some of the original woodwork that was in there that we can, talk a little bit about as we walk through. But
Absolutely.
Those are the original pocket doors that you don't see too often anymore. We were
Wow.
able to save those.
Nice.
So we haven't put them inside yet because we just kind of want to display them just to show the history of the house.
Absolutely.
But this table was, so on top of like just trying to figure out how we wanted to design the house, which, I could share a little bit more as we go through around my passion for community development and Luis's love for construction.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started engaging the community over a 2-year process, and we hosted about 4 different community events.
Nice.
Everything from door knocking, engaging with community partners, engaging youth in the process, and kind of teaching people around the design build process and what does it look like, along with actually teaching them about rezoning, because obviously we had to go through a rezoning hearing in order to occupy as an office.
Okay.
What we found out was that we did not need to rezone. The house actually had an old commercial designation that
Wow.
they were able to reignite
Okay.
from like the horse and carriage days.
Wow.
So they used to sell ice, and the garage was a candy store.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we got really fortunate in that aspect.
Nice.
But one of the things that was unique about this table was we used a local contractor, Troy Carpentry. He actually has a carpentry shop down the street and does custom cabinetry.
Nice.
And we knew that we wanted to continue engaging and having important conversations. And so we had this concept around what would it look like around a round table or having discussions. And so we didn't have a lot of space, but what we were able to do is collaborate on a design build for this structure. That actually comes out and it rolls out completely.
Nice.
And it extends a couple feet so that we're able to probably sit about 15 people around.
Wow.
So
Lovely.
yeah. So we're super excited about just continuing conversations and having intentional conversations around how can we engage more community in the development process.
Absolutely.
So in that process with community engaging, and then even to go back a little bit further doing commercial development, what we realized is a lot of our clients didn't understand the design build process, right? Like, so a lot of times when the GC comes in, the design is already set, we're doing estimates, it's over budgeted, it's not feasible. And clients were very frustrated in that process, and we would always usually have to go back to the drawing board, value engineer, and so engaging our clients became part of kind of our differentiator as a GC. And so in the process, when we started engaging the community, it was the same thing. We felt like we needed to engage and educate the community around kind of all the steps and how this would play out, including from the design to even like socially thinking about how would we activate the space, what would it look like. Not all the community was supportive of us being here as an office or thinking about doing co-working space for contractors.
Yep.
And so we had to adapt, and hence came kind of the idea around the incubator so that we could still engage our close-knit, trusted contractors, but like how could we work with the community and adapt what development would look like for them within their own community.
Absolutely.
And it was a mixed bag, right? Because we're born and from this community. And so we had people that had been here for 5 years that weren't supportive of us.
Oh.
So that was very controversial for us to think about how do we engage that process and still compromise, right? And so it became kind of this kind of beautiful love story of what the Design Build Green Hub was going to be. Hence, that's kind of how the name came about, the Design Build Green Hub. The green aspect came in play. We had just finished another project in Southwest that was a green project. That was extremely expensive, and we realized at the time green was coming and it was important, but it really wasn't affordable for most Detroiters.
Right.
And so as we started building out the space intentionally, we started looking at the scope. We hired a consultant, Kevin McNeely, who used to be the president for the USGBC,
Got
the
it.
Detroit chapter.
Okay.
Who really started looking at the windows and like how could we achieve more green goals but still be affordable. And so we started kind of ripping apart the scope, and we started really unpacking some of the materials we were going to use along with the green infrastructure outside. So that's a GSI system that has a bioswale underneath it.
Okay.
And 3D construction printing, which is kind of like the new thing that's coming in the future. And we partnered with Citizen Robotics for
Nice.
that piece, along
Yep.
with and Hampton Matthews, who
Nice.
helped us design kind of the engineering part of it. So the process, I would say, the inclusive process of building out the Design Build Green Hub really became the focus, right? Of like building out the steps, community engagement, what was affordable, what could we implement that was green, that was important. But part of the other green part that we talk about, or sustainability, is sustaining our own community,
Absolutely.
our history, and providing economic opportunities for locals, right? Like our local sub businesses as well. And so that ended up kind of coming like a social mission of AGI, which we knew at some point we had to kind of like separate kind of the community and like the for-profit business. And that's how Detroit Future Ops was kind of like evolved into the social arm, which really ended up becoming my baby, which is, you know, my first passion for community. And so just this past year, we just formalized Detroit Future Ops as a 501c3.
Congrats. That's not easy to do.
Yep. And we were on the fence about it. I honestly didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I knew it was another entity. I also felt like, were we kind of, you know, taking resources away from our community organizations? But what we realized is that nobody understood construction or were doing the type of work that we were doing, and so there was a gap. And so we had a lot of potential funders or partners that encouraged us to kind of step into the space and step up. And so that's what we kind of did. And so that's how Detroit Future Ops came about. The name was kind of inspired quite a few years ago, when Detroit Future City kind of announced like what was coming down the pipeline around strategic neighborhood funds. And so we knew about 10 years ago, that there were things that were going to start happening to our community that we were not privy of. And so Luis, being military and kind of future and the ops kind of started.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Kind of started playing around with the names and, you know, how we were going to strategically like align ourselves with what was happening.
Not only that, we had more of a vision of finding other military or veteran entrepreneurs. And so it was interesting when we went through the whole zoning process for using this as a business, there was a lot of pushback. And so one thing that what comes to mind when people hear veterans is, for whatever reason, whatever stereotypes we have, is that, oh, veterans are homeless. Veterans have mental issues. Veterans this. And so we were like, well, that has nothing to do. I'm a veteran, I do business, and I want to help other veterans that do business along with my community. And so,
and they had that same perspective on contractor
absolutely.
workers, and that's what was the pushback with the co-working space. I think they have some preconceived ideas around contractors, minority contractors, along veterans,
and veterans.
That veterans were homeless, and you know, contractors were rough or whatever,
whatever
reason. And so that was some of the pushback around, like, who do we know who these people are? They're in the middle of a community.
What also happens is in the community, our community, the original community, is busy working. They don't have a whole lot of time to show up and have these conversations. But the newcomers, a lot of wealthy people that we have here in the Hubbard-Richard area now. So now people want it their way. And so people who have been here just a few years want to give you their thoughts about how they want the community to be. And so when we say we are community members and this is what we want to do because we've had these issues.
You've been here for years.
Been here. They're like, well, that's not what we want. And so, you know, when people show up at the city, who's usually showing up to these meetings?
That's a really good point.
So it was some good conversation because what we want to do is fill in that gap, right?
Absolutely.
So we got new people coming, they have good ideas, they have good intentions, but they don't have your experience, so they just don't know. And so a lot of times we get upset with newcomers, but if they haven't lived it, they don't know it. So they don't even know what you're talking about. They don't understand why we say certain things because this is not the Detroit now that it used to be, and we all know that.
Or the history.
One of the events that we did right here in Stanton Park was, what was the name of the one, like kind of a storytelling event that we did, that we hosted, and we asked historical community members or legacy Detroiters to come in to talk about their history, being from the community. And some people were 2-3 generations. And so you had a lot of newcomers that came because they were curious what we were doing, but they were able to hear the stories of the people that had been here way before the revitalization.
Very helpful.
That were able to like hold down the community.
Absolutely.
We didn't realize how big of an event that would be.
Yeah.
And it turned out that, I mean, we got so much feedback. People,
Yeah.
and still, you know, and so
Even now.
that's been part of the whole hub now is let's continue telling those stories.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure Tanya shared a little bit about the space and who owned it and where it came from and the family.
Yeah.
It's a revolving, you know, it's a
And so
story
one
that
of the
we
things
share.
that I didn't share that was part of the family that had came from Mexico was the Lozano family. And so part of kind of like the house, I feel like sometimes the house chose us versus we chose the house, because Frank Lozano, who was one of the older sons, was my elementary principal when I was at Webster Elementary. But he was well known and loved in the community. He was a pillar. He was an educator. He was one of the first Latino administrative principals in Southwest Detroit, or in Detroit, right? Yeah. But he was also well known for his music. So he was Paquito in the Latin Orchestra Band. And so he was kind of a swing band back in the 40s or 50s.
Nice.
He traveled all over the world and was well known. And so having all these connections to the house, along with the sister, when she moved in, this house was also known to be a safe house. So when Latinos came from the country to Detroit for work, they would stop here and get rest and get food and drink, and then they would go on to meet their families or get work or whatnot.
Wow.
And so
A lot of history.
it was like a lot of history here. So we feel really honored to like preserve the house. It's not just a building and a structure, but it's really about equity and our history of being rooted and remaining in our community. The original chimney stack was one of the things we were able to save in the house, and you'll see it when you go upstairs. That stack goes from the basement all the way up to the 3rd floor. And Luis was like, I don't think we're gonna be able to save this. And I said, nope, yes you are. And so he found a local welder that was able to like
Mr. Pedro.
Yep, Mr. Pedro, that he used to work for Diseños, which is an iron fencing company, and basically structured it and saved it. And so this goes all the way up. You'll see it on the 3rd floor.
Nice.
So that was one of the original pieces we were able to save in the house as well. So.
How about the art, Tanya? Who's this?
Yep. So the art is a local artist. Her name is Juliana Samora. San Roman. And so this mural was kind of a dedication to the family, our community. Frank Lozano, who was a trumpet player through Panchito and the Latin Orchestra Band, but it kind of symbolizes our community, the women that have held our community, as a tribute to the house and the family.
So what's this room?
So the war room is just where, you know, quick decisions got to be made. And so a lot of our projects, we get these calls and the project's already going. And so somebody's got to make a decision right now. And a lot of times I don't have all the information. And so if Javi's got the information or he's on the job, we can get in there. We can pull up our screens, we can do our Zoom chats, we can bring in whoever we need to. We contract even some of our professional guys like project management. We've got an older gentleman that's been with us now for about 10 years. And so Mike, he'll walk me through anything. And so he's the IT documentation guru for AGI Construction. And so we can verbally speak about it, but when it's got to be on paper, we just get in front of Mike and say, hey, Mike, we're going to give you everything we got. Now we need you to document it. And so by the time we get it back to the client or the architects or all the other professionals that are out there, we don't just sound like we're just, you know, talking. We're giving you documentation. And you know, if you know anything about construction, documentation is all that matters. And it's like you can only sand so much, you know what I mean? And so if you're looking for perfection, you're not going to find it here. But I just got comfortable with it. Typically, I'm very detail oriented, and I just, you know, I gotta just keep going, and it just didn't make sense.
No, it looked good to me.
We've done this. You look back at it, you're just like.
And these are the original steps.
Yeah.
Original steps. Yeah,
Nice.
I think there's 2 spindles that we've got to swap out, and we've actually just made those, so we're going to install those. But
130 years old.
130 years old.
120. Okay.
Yeah.
On here.
Yeah.
Oh wow! Look at this place.
Kind of more of, you know, where we'll operate, manage,
Gotta put the lights on.
meet with our clients.
Absolutely.
Luis could tell you a little bit about the HVAC system. This is more advanced green, more commercial grade system that we invested in.
Hey, that's Luis on the TV.
Yep.
Yeah, look at that. You tell you've done it a few times.
This is a little bit of a highlight of some of the different projects we've done, along with some of the pilot group or the people that have worked on the project.
Wow, this is amazing.
That was the green hybrid house that we worked on, was a land bank. You can kind of see what it looked like before and after.
Absolutely.
Yep. This was almost $1 million project.
I can only imagine with that. Is that greenhouse is what you would call that?
Yeah, absolutely. He wanted to grow hydroponically in the house.
Nice.
And so that's what the whole point of the large glass sunroom was. It's right down the street from that first project that Tanya mentioned, which was the Crystal Ray Cafeteria. And so it mimics a lot of those features from the church to the house. But he had some history to the school and the church originally. So yeah, it was a nice project.
Nice. So is there anything else you want to share, or I can just get some B-roll of up here to a certain extent? But I mean, I guess what? Oh wow. Okay. So that's
So this up here is a makeup air unit.
Yeah.
And so it's pulling in fresh air from outside all the time. Right now we don't have it running, but all the time when it is in a normal setting, it will be running all the time. It heats and cools the air as it brings it in, and then it mixes it in. So here's one mini split unit. There's another air handler mini split unit, and then there's one more. So there's 3. So now we have 2 front offices that can be controlled separately from this open space, and then another office in the back. That whole area can be controlled.
Got it.
So for energy efficiency, if you're the only one working here and you're in only one space, you only have to heat and cool one space. So we're not talking about heat and cooling a whole 2,500 square feet off of a forced air unit. And then obviously trying to create the space and make it seem and look bigger. And then I think just the coolness of being able to see the ductwork exposed like this, it just adds a whole nother level of dynamic.
100%.
Yeah.
So all of the offices are for rent right now?
So that's where we're kind of at right now in terms of developing programming. We're in workshops for the contractors.
Yep.
This will be one space that will be rentable. This one will have 3 desks. And I'm debating on if we kind of save these spaces for a couple of the contractors that come through our program and kind of build like a residency program. So 3 contractors could be here for 6 months out of the year, mentor under us, get exposed to the larger projects, meet our network, trust network, build their network, and then move on. So this way we're not kind of holding space with permanent. But we will be doing things like a membership, virtual mailboxes, and boot camp programs that will dig into the estimating, project managing, and some of the other classes or barriers we've heard from contractors that want to learn more.
Nice.
And the key is for us, like people are like, well, how many people are you hiring? And we're like, it's not about hiring directly for AGI. It's not about that. It's about finding out what someone is good at and help them
Build
progress. The more they progress, the more we progress. Whether they work directly for me or they're their own contractor or subcontractor, that doesn't matter. And so again, I think it probably takes away from our profit and keeping things, micromanaging people, but I think it's a new way of the future. After COVID, I think we've seen that with a lot of independent contractors. People were just like, I want to be my own boss. Well, if you want to, there's some additional responsibilities that come with that, but we can show you what they are if you're willing to go down that road. Some people aren't. It's not for everybody. But our new economy now, people move and do different things. Nobody does the same thing for 20, 30 years anymore. It's like, if you're not doing 3 different things and making all of it work and moving in and out of these situations, you're not moving into the future.
You're also building other entrepreneurs, Detroit-based entrepreneurs and contractors to get their own opportunities and really exposing them to the professional development side of why aren't we having more minority estimators and project managers?
Why aren't we having more developers?
Why are we just talking about skilled trades laborers?
Why are outsiders coming in and developing all of our land? So we've got this park right here, and there's 6 lots just on the other side of it. Been abandoned forever. Somebody from Miami, I'm told, just bought them, and they're going to do 18 units over there. And so these units are going to be probably $500,000 a pop, times 10 of them. That's money that's stuff we should be doing. And so we need to start making things happen quickly. And so building out the hub was really, when Tanya talked about everybody works in silos, we don't have time to send emails and wait for people to respond. We need to get together, We need to get together quickly, we need to disseminate the information, and we need to be able to keep the conversation going.
This room is called the Fireside Chat Room. So it was inspired by the family. We wanted to preserve, this was probably the room that we could preserve like the most architectural features of the house.
Absolutely.
And talk about the history. But what we wanted is a place in the house to be able to have real talk conversations with other minority mentor or peers around what some of the challenges and the barriers are. And so this room will be dedicated to Frank Lozano. That's kind of some of the information right here. This is Preserving Southwest Detroit. We have some of his original handwritten musical notes.
And that's Frank
there.
Lozano down there in the middle, and then that's some of his handwritten big band music.
Behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so
Look at this
it's
fireplace.
Yeah, so that's actually metal. It looks like it's wood. It's deteriorated, but that deterioration has like created this marbleized, rusty look. And,
Absolutely. It was great.
And the guys are like, let's just put a clear coat on it. I said, a clear coat? What's that gonna do? And when it looked like that, I said, man, that's
perfect.
that's
perfect.
perfect. So my name is Luis-Ali. I'm the president of AGI Construction. I joined the military in 1995, and I was in the military for 26 years. I just retired a couple years ago. But prior to leaving to the military as a youngster, I used to work with my uncle. He was a union carpenter. And so I had a lot of experience doing construction. When I decided I wanted to leave the military, my uncle told me, you should become an electrician. If you still want to do the trades and you enjoy doing that, I would become an electrician. Yep. And so I did that. I took his advice. I came back home. I tried to go the union route. Couldn't get into the union. They had me sitting on the sidelines, doing testing, doing interviews. They kept telling me, oh, you're a great candidate, you're military, we're gonna bring you in. And so after about 8 months, I said, I can't wait, I've gotta go to work. So I ended up finding a non-union shop, and it really operated no differently than the union shops. They paid for my schooling. Nice. I went through a 4 or 5 year apprenticeship, got my journeyman's license, and then 2008 hit. And so everybody remembers 2008, we went through the recession, housing, everything lost its value. Construction, there were no projects going on. And so we went into survival mode. There was a lot of foreclosed properties, and as I got laid off from work, we decided we can keep doing our own thing. And I had a lot of side jobs doing electrical work. That was my trade. And we got into the foreclosure market. And so just to make money and to survive, we started cleaning out properties, doing home cleanouts. And over time, we just really thought like, this is not why we got into construction. Like, I know we were just trying to pay bills and survive, but that led us down the road to say, you know what, let's do a little bit more in construction other than just electrical. Went back, got a builder's license, attached that to the company, and we just started with kitchen remodels, basement remodels. And over time, as the market got a little bit better, we were doing residential work. But being in a residential space is difficult. You're in people's personal space, the jobs never end. Usually the wife is the one at home, she's a homemaker, and if you're remodeling a kitchen, you'll never, never complete satisfaction. So once we got the opportunity to look at a couple commercial projects, that really changed things for us and how we looked at how we wanted to grow our business.
Nice.
And so we really started focusing on the community and seeing how we could help revitalize our neighborhood. And as the economy started to come back, people were talking about this revitalization. We had a lot of small businesses up and down our corridor, and we wanted to become that company that was the neighborhood local contractor. So we talked about it before it happened, and we thought about it, and really Tanya's vision, I was always hands-on. I was always the labor guy working with my tools, my tool belt. I thought I had to do everything by myself. And so Tanya really had the foresight to say, you know what, you can't continue to work like this hard. And so really started to put the networking that you need to do to really grow a business.
Nice.
And obviously meeting guys and talking to people and hearing other people's experiences and what they wanted to do, and knowing we had already been down this road for a few years in survival mode. Now here 2012 comes, and it's like, I would say it was just like a window of opportunity, because you could start seeing and feeling the change that was happening around us. And so we really took full advantage of that to really
But it was a rough road, right?
Absolutely. It was a rough
And it was the
road.
barriers and the challenges that we kept hitting our head against the wall, trying to figure out how do we grow this thing. And then what I realized was supporting him and kind of being in the meetings was that there weren't a lot of minorities in the room,
Right.
In contractor and
Still not.
It is a very white male dominated
Mm-hmm.
field, and so that began to kind of, I think, frustrate us a lot. And so when we started doing the neighborhood projects with the commercial projects, we realized it was a better, safe space for us to be because we were in our own community, we were helping our own community. There was more trust, and we didn't have we were able to act as prime, which is a rare thing. And so being a GC, being a prime, and we had one specific project that really kind of changed the trajectory because he did the Goldman Sachs program, we had the business plan, we were thinking about government contracting, commercial, which kind of primes we wanted to work for. And we went after all the certifications, so we're SDBE or SDBA, DBA, SDSOB, all of them, right? And what we found is that those certifications really don't mean anything if you don't have the capital and the administrative professional side of understanding kind of all the ins and outs of construction,
The paperwork
the
side.
paperwork side, the administrative side, and then also like the connections, right? So you can have the certifications, but if you don't have those relationships, those jobs never really materialize for you as a GC.
Yeah, what happened is we got an opportunity to do a mission project. It was a housing project, Village Park Apartments over there by Belle Isle.
Okay.
So Van Dyke and Jefferson.
Nice.
And we're like, this
How big
is
of a
it.
project was that?
For us, it was
How many doors?
It was 32, I believe.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, actually, it was 32 in one building, and the second building was another 20, so it was about 50 total.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the largest
During
project
the
to date
process,
at that
part
point.
of one building caught on fire, so they took so many units away from us because that went through an insurance process.
Got it.
But the fact that we bid on it, we had to get the financing for it. DDF, Detroit Development Fund. We had talked to them since probably 2008 on Tanya's mom. She had a business, she had a bar that she owned for 42 years. And so DDF funded some work that she had done there. And this is when we were just thinking and starting our business. And we said, we just don't have a way to borrow money right now. But DDF, this is who we are. We're just having this conversation with you, And so they said,
Keep us on your radar.
Absolutely. Keep us on your radar. So because they gave us the confidence to go out and bid something and said, based on you getting an award of a contract, we'll fund it. Just
What
based off
year
of
was
that.
this?
This was 2012 when we finally actually financed. So we're
Got it.
talking to them 2008, getting to know them 2012.
The opportunity.
Finally, the opportunity came up.
Got it.
And so, so they funded us. And so, we had to go out and buy a load of cabinets, and the cabinets were $80,000.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, I got to come up with $80,000.
Yeah.
And so DDF basically said, we can close the
got you.
deal,
Yeah.
but it's not happening tomorrow. And
Right.
so they're like, hey, you got a start date. You got to start this project. So here I am trying to figure out how I'm going to get this money to make this lump sum purchase now so that we can be ready, because we were already getting ready to kick off a job before we even started.
Yeah,
We're like, we can't even handle step one. So these are the difficulties that happens when you're on big projects.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times people are like, well, here's the opportunity, here's the financing, but it's not it. There needs to be some mentoring. There needs to be letting people know these are the steps you're going to go through when you try to go after this type of project. And mostly the other people in the world already, in the business world, they've had people teach them this. They know this. They know the process, especially in construction. It's a dog-eat-dog business,
So I got a question for you. I see this a lot with minority contractors where you underbid the project, not you in particular, but us in general as minority GCs and contractors and things of that nature. And my question to you is, did you find yourself potentially underbidding yourself on even this Mishta project to try your best at, getting in the game, getting your foot in the door, and I guess kind of talk about that experience and what you learned about that in general?
Yeah, it's interesting because, there's rules when you're doing, especially a government or a Mishta or any type of project like that. You got prevailing wages. So your wages are set. If you know the type of work you're doing, you go to your website and you can see the labor rates and you know what you have to bid. But even at that, a lot of the primes and people who are running these big projects are like, you got to bring your number down, you know. And so when you hear that, you're like, well, there must be a way. So you try to make things happen because you're excited about the opportunity. You think this is it. And so what we realized after that project was, man, this was not a moneymaker for us, you know. And so people say, well, get your first one, and then you get your second one, and then you start, you know, you'll start. And I'm just like, you know, I don't want to be stuck within. People get stuck within working for a certain GC because they always owe you from the previous job, and so now you have to go back and try to make it up. And so you just keep going and going and going, and then now you're kind of back in a circle where you're like, I'm not picking and choosing the jobs that I want. I'm just doing it because I've kind of. Yeah,
last one.
I've kind of, what do we call it? When you're trying to...
Still Peter?
Not so much that, but you know, you just... so to speak, yeah.
You're never ahead, you know, and you're never really profitable.
So that's when we really step back and say, you know what, maybe that's not the way we want to go. Maybe we don't want to focus on working for primes and becoming that subcontractor that they're looking for. You know, especially with minorities, they're looking for that minority contractor to come in, give them that credit that makes them look good. And if you can just keep performing and being that guy, then, you know, if it works out for you, it works out for you. But there's a larger percentage of contractors that doesn't work out. And so they, you know, a lot of times there's failure in there's hiccups in these projects, and when you there's no soft landing for you. So if you didn't do something right, there's no one to say, hey, it's okay, we'll pick you up, we'll help you out. We know you didn't understand this piece, so let's just, no, you don't know what you're doing, you're not getting paid.
I think the judgment for minorities is harsher as well. The consequences are harder.
100%.
So you have to work harder and prove yourself harder, and mistakes are not easily taken. So
let me ask you this: in the city of Detroit, it seems like being a minority, as of recent, has potentially given us some power when it comes to certain things, application wise, and, you know, certain funding opportunities for us. Do you feel the same as a GC, being a minority, going after the larger contracts and these larger opportunities, that in a way kind of gives you a leg up in comparison to other non-minority applicants of, you know, funding and projects and things of that nature? Would you agree, or would you disagree to that sentiment?
So,
can I answer that?
Absolutely.
Because I think this goes back to your first question around the estimating. And I think historically, we are not used to running our own businesses and being financially literate in terms of building a business structure. That has put us at, you know, a disservice, right? And so if you're not understanding the full spectrum of your business, what your profits and losses are, what your services are, really digging into the nitty-gritty of what point are you breaking even, you're not really running your business. You could be self-employed and you're working, right? But running a business is when your business can run without you, right? So I think there's a lot to be said around like mentorship, understanding the industry is a different beast in itself, but knowing and understanding business and how to be a successful business is key. And this goes back to my comment around like you can have all the certifications in the world, but if you don't understand the game and how to build your business, what good is it? And I feel very frustrated that yes, there's all these opportunities, but the fear is if we're not properly preparing ourselves and our subs and minorities to like deal with the realities of what the risks are, especially in construction, GCs take the highest risk in all
100% agree.
Yeah. And so most people don't care, right? Like, and most contractors, what I had learned in the process that we didn't even understand the risk we were taking on and the extra roles and responsibilities that we were taking on that was actually we were losing money because there were things that the architect should have been doing or the clients weren't making decisions. And so learning that game around like what your role and responsibility is and not being so hungry to get the work, but understanding where the lines are and where to keep yourself safe is important. And so even though there's all these opportunities, if we're not properly preparing people, minorities and people of color, risk and like how to be profitable and to value their worth at the table, we're setting people up for failure.
And we jokingly say that architects, because they are the upper echelon in the construction, architects and engineers, a lot of times we have to question them. And so for us, being the tradespeople, being the general contractors, and maybe not even as educated, they kind of look down at you and say, you know, this is what I directed and this is what I expect. And you know from experience that this is not going to work, or this is not usually how it goes. So to be able to learn to speak at the table and understand and know your knowledge and share that in a way, right, you have to communicate. And so you have to know how to communicate very well. We jokingly say that these architects are like lawyers. And so sometimes you come out of these meetings and, you know, everything got turned around, and then you're walking out the door and you're confused about what you said. So,
but we work in silos.
Yeah.
You know, there's this very much like how we talked about earlier. By the time that, you know, GCs get engaged, the prints are done. You know, the design phase is done. And so there's a lot of backtracking at that point that's costing everybody time and the client more money in the process. So the idea was, how do we be a bridge? How do we engage a little bit more to talk about some of the frustrations that we deal with as a GC versus how the architects are looking at the projects? What is the proper roles in here? Should I be responsible for that, or should you be responsible for that? Or the owner should be responsible for that. And I think also too, putting more value on the trades. I think that part of the frustration and the involvement around the trades and work, especially in this boom where there's just too much work and not enough workers, and there's skilled trade shortage. It's just not a Detroit thing, it's a national issue. It is. Right? And you don't have a lot of minorities in the trades as well. And Louis, part of his frustration was dealing with the culture coming in, people making jokes about being Mexican, you should be out with the landscapers. I mean, like, these are real things. And so hearing those stories would frustrate me. And so I'm like, you should talk about this stuff. Like, this stuff should be out in the open, which was part of some of the fuel and the passion to start engaging around the advocacy and, you know, really pushing the conversation in the forefront with kind of the real talk.
And it was interesting because in the beginning, a lot of what we talk about now with our real talks and what we talk about at the hub is we obviously have these barriers, but what were barriers and were probably complaints out of my mouth in the beginning became questions or topics. And so everything that we've gone through and everything that we felt there was an issue with, we're openly discussing it. And so every step of the way, whether it's through the trade, through general contracting, through contracts, pre-construction agreements, through estimates, through people understanding their numbers and why numbers are certain things. You know, some guys are like, well, my number is this because that's the going rate. Well, explain the going rate and what the going rate means, because everybody has a different background, everybody has a different overhead, you know, system. So as long as you know your numbers and you can negotiate and explain why they are what they are, then that's it. That's what you need to do. But we can't just go out there just throwing things out openly saying here's the going rate, but we don't understand why. So be profitable, but understand where you're at and why you're there. And then same thing for owners. Like, we realize as we step into the general contracting role and gotten larger projects, we're working with developers now. And so the developers, like yourself or like Joe or whoever else, there's some learning curve there too.
100%.
And so our people that are trying to help our community are trying to develop, but they don't know step one. And so we're like, oh, really good point. We know some of this stuff, so why don't we share more knowledge? And so you almost start saying, okay, well, it's not just about general contracting and trades anymore. This is about development. This is about designing our cities. This is about community and how do we help all businesses grow. So, you know, what started off for contracting now has just become a whole ecosystem. So even with the hub here now, we have events all the time. So we got all our local caterers. We know all our people. We're like, hey, you got this week, you got next week, you got this event, you got that event. We got artists. You know, everybody loves art in the urban cities now. In Detroit, we've always been like, you know, huge graffiti artists and muralists, and now it's the popular thing to do. So, you know, every chance we get, we're trying to insert that into a project and create more opportunities for everybody.
Absolutely. How long have you been married for?
You should know this one. It's a big one.
25 was our last year. 25th anniversary last year. Nice. So pretty much I came in the military and
we were high school sweethearts.
Wow, nice.
We were high school sweethearts.
How did that work? Did you travel with Louise when he was in the military?
So Luis's pathway out for the city and, you know, looking at his future trajectory was military. For me, we were dating already, and we had been dating for six years. We were high school sweethearts. And when he decided to join the military, that was tough for me, you know, because we were tight and it was kind of like unexpected.
And she was looking for an answer. When I left, she was like, what's the situation? I don't know the situation. Listen, I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so she was really upset when I left because I
Yeah.
just couldn't give her that answer.
Yeah.
And I joined the military. I went to boot camp. I did some technical training. I came back a few months later. I'm like, where's Tanya? And they're like, oh, she left. Italy. She
Italy?
off to Italy.
What?
So, yeah.
So that's probably a good segue, yeah. So both of my parents are immigrants. I'm first American generation. And so my father was from Mexico and my mother was from Italy. And so, you know, my parents ended up separating when I was young, like 8 or 9, and my mom she came in through Ellis Island and came through the Michigan train station, and then kind of had an arranged marriage, and then later had some children, and then ended up landing in Southwest. And so in her divorce settlement, because she was on the pathway to citizenship, they gave her a business, the bar, so that he had bought. And
Wow.
so that basically was her.
And what year was this?
That would have been, so I'm 76. It was probably like 1960. I mean, she came when she was 15, so she came in 1955, and then the bar probably was 1967.
So your mom was a bar owner in
She was
19...
one of the first
Wow.
bar owners
Yeah,
in
you
Detroit.
ask anybody about Giovanna, and they're like, oh,
Yep.
yeah, Giovanna. Like,
Yep. So my mom ran a business for 40-something years right here on Berner, and you know, just kind of building her life here in Southwest Detroit. She still lives here in Hubbard Farms. And so basically we were raised on top of the bar, and then when she was able to establish herself, she bought a house on Hubbard and been there ever since. And so I was exposed to business through my mom, right? So second generation of just kind of being an entrepreneur and watching her navigate that and having to count money, cash out, you know, order inventory, manage workers, you know, those kind of things. And so when Luis decided to leave, I really wasn't doing well in school. I mean, I think all of us were traumatized by kind of what was happening in the 90s in the neighborhood. I mean, I kind of throw this out there. A lot of people hear me talk about it all the time, but I mean, it was a dark time in Detroit. I mean, that was when it was murder capital. We watched our friends get slaughtered in the alleys.
Yeah.
People carried guns. When we went through high school, we would have to walk through security metal detectors, and they had chains along the lockers because they didn't want people to stop. The bathrooms didn't have doors. Like,
Wow.
This is the reality of our teenage years that traumatized us. And so, yeah, so when Luis left, I was very upset because I was like, I don't know what we're going to do. Like, I don't know what to do, right? College wasn't part of the discussion. You know, we were surviving day by day at that point. It wasn't like how it is now, which is really amazing to
Yeah,
watch.
I love it now. You talk
You
to
know,
a young
you-
person like, oh, I want to be an engineer. I want to be an architect. I want to do this. I'm like, yeah, we never had those conversations. That's not.
And I think that's where the driver, where mentorship comes, is so
Yeah.
important to us. It's literally rooted in who we are, right? And so it's not a trendy thing to say, or it's the things that I guess that we wish that we had when we were younger to get further ahead, that, you know, we want to be able to provide. And it was important that we seen that. And so we've had a lot of mentors along the way that have helped us get to where we're at. But for me, you know, once he left, and again, my mom was from Italy, my sister was living there, and she said, well, I was devastated. And so I was like, I don't really know what to do. And she was like, well, you can come stay with me. She was married and she was living there. And so I worked on an army base for a couple months, and I lived there for 6 months. So when Luis came back, I was gone.
Wow.
But it was also my opportunity to kind of like see the world and like figure it out. And there was so much more outside of Detroit that it just kind of opened up my mind around like, yeah, what is next,
Yep.
you know? And I came home, and I had been exposed. At that time, there was a lot of effort with a lot of community leaders that had been really holding down our community for decades. And there was a nonprofit organization that had started a workforce program for at-risk young adults and retired gang members. And so people laugh when we talk about it, but we were affected by gangs, right? Like you couldn't walk down the street, you couldn't wear a certain color, you stayed on your side of the neighborhood. If you just lived on one side, you were associated with that side, right? And these were our brothers, sisters, cousins, friends. And so I ended up going through that program, and there was a large Hispanic manufacturing center that had moved back into Southwest because it was designated as the empowerment zone under the original Archer administration. And it was a nonprofit organization, a manufacturing center, and St. Anne's Church. And they negotiated a peace between some rivalry gangs, and in exchange, the Hispanic Manufacturing Center committed to hiring at-risk young adults from the neighborhood that would go through this program. And so I went through that program, and I ended up in automotive administrative, and I worked for one of the only female manufacturing owners named Carmen Munoz. And so it was my first exposure to corporate, kind of gave me my foothold to kind of like, there's other things, and that kind of set my trajectory into kind of where I was gonna end up navigating in different ways. And so I ended up doing very well, but I hated corporate. It just it was really hard for me to feel part of the culture. I didn't understand it, right? Coming from the hood, coming from a workforce program, trying to find comfortability, what that corporate culture was like, but had a lot of support. And I ended up getting a couple other opportunities that moved me out to Clawson, and I hated it. And one of the big things for me was like realizing that people that just because people have money, they struggle with the same things that we struggled with in the hood.
100%.
Whether it was drugs, alcohol, displaced, broken families. And that was my first kind of like aha of like, they're not better, and I do belong. Like it was something like, I can't explain it, right? Like it was kind of my mind opening up to different opportunities that kind of gave me confidence. But at that point, I decided that I wanted to go back to my community, and I wanted to work for the same program that gave me my first opportunity, and that I needed to advocate for other people just like people did for me. And so I ended up working for Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, and from there I did everything from peer-to-peer job development to fund development. And so when I worked there, when Luis was going through this time, and mind you, by this time, me and Luis are long distance relationship, we get married, we're talking about kids, we're looking at investments. I decided that I really wanted to do investment properties and have a family. And that's kind of where the intersection and the cross becomes kind of me helping Luis support, hence years later, with kind of integrating my passion for community development and workforce development.
And your connection to, I would say, movers and shakers in the neighborhood, in the city. And so as we grow in the business, and I'm telling Tanya what I think I want to do and what we should do, she's saying, well, let's connect with this person, let's connect. And so she was always connecting. And so I'm always working, she's always connecting. I'm working, she's connecting. And after a while, that started to flourish. And
So full circle, 20 years later, when we started kind of engaging around some of the commercial work, because I was telling Luis, this is not working. I'd rather go back to work. I hate residential construction. At Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, Ideal, which is the only Hispanic manufacturing that's still standing 25 years later. So the same company that gave me my first in for my corporate job has now just one last standing Hispanic member who has now expanded from manufacturing to steel to contracting and other things. And they are the probably largest minority contractor here in the city. And he's like, hey, I want to help you guys. Because I'm like, hey, we're doing construction now. I was like one of the original participants when I was fresh out of high school, 18 years old. Here we are, we have kids, family, we have a business. He's like, I'm gonna help you guys. So he gave us our first large commercial project, which was the Crystal Ray project. And it was a full 6,000 square foot basement renovation. And he's like, here you go, sink or swim. and and we were like literally just trying to keep our head above the water.
It's a school project. So if you know anything about schools, you got to get in and out. You got the summer months, and that's it. And so we know summer's 8 weeks, and so 8 weeks, 6,000 square feet, full kitchen remodel, full media center, full cafeteria.
It was crazy.
Bathrooms. I mean,
We didn't know what we were doing.
we were going gangbusters, but we were hungry.
Yeah.
And so there were some hiccups. But again, we had a mentor in Frank Venegas in the Ideal Group who really just said, you guys got it. Like, we're going to support you. But we learned a lot about sitting at that table in our coordination meetings about who's doing what and how it's to be done. And so the paperwork side of it was something that really something that we needed to know. So it wasn't a big money maker, but in the end, it changed the trajectory of how we operated and what we understood. And so we always
That's when we realized,
we realized that it was a different project as far as like community based. These kids were eating lunch in their gymnasium, and so there would be food and spilt milk and all this stuff. And then now we've just created this whole basement cafeteria media center with speakers, so now they're having homecomings and proms, and it just, and so it changed the type of work we did. We were like, man, this is not just a typical project. This was something that created a space. And so everything we think about now is how do we create more spaces for our people. I would say if you're thinking about getting into business or you're thinking about making some type of community impact, is find what you're passionate about or something that you're good at, and be the best at it. But engage people, engage your community, engage young people, engage older people. I hear people talking about mentorship a lot, but mentorship doesn't just happen. It's not just going to fall in your lap and somebody's just going to come up to you and say, hey, I want to be a mentor. You have to engage, and you have to be doing something actively for people to recognize that you're hungry for that or that you want that. And so I think that's really important, that you're putting in work. It's not easy, but when you put in the work, it's fulfilling. And so there's always something that will come back from that. And when we first started, we were giving away things. Like, for people to really see what you can do, you have to step in and do things sometimes, and there's no reward at first. But after doing that a few times, that's where your reputation starts to, what did I say, your reputation precedes yourself?
I think for me, realizing that, and this probably goes with that project that really changed my mindset about construction, that it's not about the building and it's not about the brick and mortar, but construction really is about this, right? It's about development, it's about ownership, it's about access to space and place, and who has accessibility to that. Just like every Detroit kid deserves a beautiful learning environment, we all deserve a learning environment. And growing up in the hood and realizing in your neighborhood, it's not because people are bad or people are lazy, it's because there's no resources. Right. There is an economic need.
Well, there's always resources.
No.
It's just who has those resources.
Back in the day, there was not. And so sometimes there is or not, but that's a good point. But understanding that what your worth, your value is, and even as a contractor, that learn the game and invest and have ownership in yourself, right? I think that's really, and know your capabilities. I think part of it is being too hungry and trying to do too much and then burning yourself, but instead of kind of taking your time and learning and understanding what your strengths are. And I'd say the biggest thing that we've learned is trust. When you grow up in the hood or in the neighborhood, it's hard to, you have this kind of distrust for a lot of different things. And I also realized that prevented us from growing quicker, and learning the process and not being afraid to ask the questions, sit at the table and knowing your worth and value, and finding those key people to kind of help you navigate to grow.
I also find it interesting, a lot of GCs that I come across, consider themselves contractors, but they, including yourself and your team, are developers in a sense as well. We're sitting in a facility that you redeveloped.
Yeah.
You took it down to the studs. You had to save it from sinking. And of course, that's the contractor mindset and expertise, but the vision came from you, and that usually is what the developer typically tries to say is where they come in play. But you had that ability to kind of put together an amazing site, right? And so what are your thoughts on if somebody were to call you a developer as well? Like, do you see yourselves as developers?
We do now, because even this, we call this a small project. Oh, we're doing a small development. And so we always say, oh, well, we do small projects. And so I think we have a mindset sometimes of who we are and what we do. And until you step into it, you start to realize like there's no difference between a small development and a large development. It's just more dollars and more people.
100%.
But you have to manage it the same way. You
Yep.
have to know the same pitfalls. You have to understand all those same aspects. So whether it's big or small, that's not the aspect of it. It's just, do you believe in it? And can you walk in that and see it, you know?
I think the other differentiator is understanding the finance side of it.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
That's the one. Yep.
That's the biggest part. So I mean, I've been told several times by like Invest Detroit, and I was really privileged enough to go through the WSDI, the Women's Sustainable Development Initiative for
Nice.
the women's contractors. I just finished that program.
Is that through Scenario?
That was hosted by Senior,
Nice.
but also WSDI. And so understanding the financial side, which goes back to like who really has the money, who's making the decisions in the process, is a big barrier. So I think part of like understanding and having great programs that are local to like help people understand that you can do this too, where are the resources, not being afraid. And so for us, I think I've just got comfortable with kind of the developer, and I'm still hesitant to call myself a developer. I call myself more of a community builder, but emerging, right, and like embracing that. But I think also as a traditional general contractor or a developer, I think that we're trying to forge a new way of looking at doing development and GC work. Because even how we do our GC work is not traditional. The way we advocate, we're always looking for cost savings because we're working with tight budgets. That's not typical, you know.
The amount of time that we spend
amount of
trying
time,
to
yeah.
lessen the budget, find contractors, give people opportunities, it just takes more time. And most developers and most big GCs will say, well, it's not possible because the numbers don't work. It's possible. You just got to be willing to make those numbers adjust to what they need to
And take a little
for
bit less
community
profit.
work. And so, less profit. So, is your mission profit or is your mission community? And so, people use community, haphazardly, and sometimes it's just that key word that they want to put out there. But it's important for us to make sure that we're giving people in the community opportunities, and in order to do that, you have to slow down. And you have to teach and create time, workshops, learning,
Tangible
create
opportunities
tangible opportunities
that create income.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. There's so many small business trainings and organizations, and they're great. They're great at doing what they do. But when Tanya says it's not construction based, it's really not, because there's no one saying, "Hey, come over here and get this training," and I've already got a job lined up that you can step right into.
Right.
And so, if you're willing to go down that path and take those steps, the opportunities are there. And so that was never there for us in that way. It was always jump into it, figure it out, fail. Okay, I'm not going to do that again. Let me try this other route. And so you can only do that so many times before you just have to go back to work, or you have to figure out something else. So, it shouldn't be that way. I think we can create environments for people to be able to survive, get opportunities, make money. And we got Javier from Ramirez Contracting right behind us, and I think he can speak to a little bit of those opportunities too.
So Javier, you were part of the initial pilot group, and if you could just tell me about your experience overall and what part you've played with AGI and with the organization and with this hub that we're standing in now.
So I actually just started doing this maybe 3 years ago.
Nice.
Just getting into the construction business. I did restaurant management for 10 years, and then during COVID kind of stepped aside from that. I did a little bit of hands-on stuff. I've always been a handy person, quick learner. I've never worked for a construction company and actually had someone to mentor me or teach me things. Everything's been kind of self-taught. So I kind of just dabbled in a little bit of stuff in the first year. It started from my own house. I did my basement. I did the restaurant, so we worked holidays and stuff, and I left just before Christmas and kind of was like, oh, let's host Christmas here. So I did my basement from scratch.
Nice.
Framing, drywall, painting, trim, electrical, flooring. And after that's kind of when I was like, oh, this was cool to do, you know, make something from nothing.
Absolutely.
You know, take a bunch of material, put it together, and now we have a nice space. So I posted it, I started getting into it, and people started asking me to do stuff for them. So I did a couple small jobs here and there throughout the year and kind of just relaxed for a bit. And then through a friend, I was connected with Tanya and Luis. So that's how I met them, and he said, hey, I met these good people. He's just a networking person. He said, you should sit down with them, have a chit chat. So we kind of came up over there and, you know, gave him my story, told him, you know, this is just kind of getting started. But then she introduced like the pilot program. Well, so there was probably 6 of us, maybe 7 of us, and the idea around it was something that really intrigued me and made me want to be a part of it. So it was kind of just like it was a growth opportunity, an opportunity for some mentors, because like Louis said, you know, nobody's really just going to come up to you. So it was a growth opportunity to have some mentors and someone to look up to, because like I said, I've never worked for a company to know this is how it goes. I was fresh, new, had to, you know, so even to this day when we get other trades that are here working, I'll maybe pause what I'm doing and I'll go take a peek just to see, you know, hey, ask questions, how do you do this, or what's this better? And even surprisingly, some people that I do meet, I mean, I'm like, hey, why don't you try it like this, from just videos that I watch, research, stuff I've read up on YouTube.
How open are people to kind of take your advice, recommendations, and mentorship in a way?
Yeah, they've been pretty open. I've worked with some older people in other different jobs, and you try to tell them, they're like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But it's been pretty good in this field so far.
So you went from the restaurant industry to construction, and so what age were you when you kind of officially kind of converted careers?
So I'm through 3 years now.
3 years.
33.
Nice.
33. I was in the restaurant for 9.
Wow.
So
I mean, and that's a completely different industry, right?
in a way, I did.
I don't agree. I think logistically and management-wise, it's very similar.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
You got to know what your project is.
Yeah.
You got to know how to set it up. You got to know how to logistically order your materials and plan for it and schedule people to be there.
But that's what I was going to say is when it comes to the restaurant, I mean, I still got to think of how much food do I need to order for this, or how much staff do I need to have, or coordinating, training people. I started in the restaurant as a server, and I went from server to bartender to assistant general manager, server, bartender, then a sales coordinator, then assistant general manager, and then I was a general manager. So, I mean, we deal with the same things, you know, scheduling, making sure people are there, training a lot. I did a lot of the training for back of house, front of house, cooking. I did a lot of training myself just to make sure that they get the right idea of this is how it should be done. So, like I said, a lot of stuff is kind of plays over, you know, profit and loss, looking at sheets, making sure we're profitable, ordering. So it comes in handy with my material accounting for it, and making sure we add up and cover everything.
Great points. Are you a licensed GC now?
So I've taken the builder's course.
Okay.
And I've been working with these guys. So I help them with, you know, project managing, material sourcing,
Gotcha.
and stuff like that. So was another big thing for me, is kind of stepping away a little bit from the, you know, being hands-on and there, having to be there every day to kind of just coordinating the different trades, you know. Example for myself, I can kind of do all of this, but if we, you know, have these small crews that, okay, this guy just does drywall, this guy just does flooring, this guy just does electrical, we can, you know, progress the projects a lot faster.
Absolutely.
You know, because I could do all this drywall, but it might take me 2 weeks.
Yeah.
When we get this guy,
Got a
he coordinate
team.
with him, and he's got a team of 4, and they're done in 3-4 days.
Absolutely. All right, one more question. What's up with the boots, man? Talk to me about the boots.
You know, these right here, they're about 2 years in, but they're waterproof. They're work boots, and you know, you ain't got time
These
to
are
shoot
work
so
boots.
much.
Nice.
These are
Yeah,
work
they
boots.
are.
Those
yeah.
are steel toe.
Yeah, these are steel
Nice.
toe. Nails ain't going through there.
Represented.
That's nice, man.
And so that's one reason why he's been so beneficial for us, because he's a fast learner. He's great with people, and he mentioned YouTube, but he uses it. We call it YouTube University. He uses it like nobody else I know. Like, I mean, if he don't understand something, he's like, I watched these 3 clips, and I seen this, and I seen that. And I'm like, oh, damn, I don't think I even knew that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna watch that myself. So, you know, when you get somebody that's hungry like that, but he also brings an IT aspect to what we do too. So using different apps, we're a few years apart. So, you know, technology, I'm into it. We got to use it. We do what we do. But the new stuff that's out, you know, as far as he did a drawing for us the other day, a customer wanted to lay out, and we're like, oh man, we got to get the architect involved. We're going to have Tanya's looking at some different softwares to make it easy. And I was like, oh, I got this figured out.
Nice.
And he sent us those drawings like that. And it was like, oh man. And so we just sending them over to the client. The client made some changes, and now we just progressed the project without having to involve, you know, high level, you know, architects or things like that, just for some basic.
Yeah, I think one of the pivotal roles that Javi played through the pilot program was that he was new to the industry, but he had amazing like capabilities and potential, right? And he's really good. His craftsmanship is really good, and so he ended up really playing more of a key role with like the pilot group in terms of like helping organize people. There's a lot of shared knowledge and mentorship that was happening. And so Javi quickly adapted to like understanding what everybody's different capabilities was, and like helping with some of the sourcing and like managing the time. It really became kind of like lead kind of superintendent on the job with like working with Luis as they were working through each of the different scopes and figuring out what could we do in-house and what did we still need to sub out.
Nice.
And so it's been a couple years now, and I would say Javi like has established his LLC. He's gone for the builder's license, still needs to do the test. But I think the unique thing that makes Javi is that he's always eager to learn, and you'll learn more about kind of the growth opportunity with the green permeable pavers we did that Javi actually did for us in this project. But I would say he's probably doubled, if not tripled, in revenue growth over the last few years from projects that we feed him directly. And then he also helps us with some project managing. So I'll put him on a project, but then he also is helping me kind of on site, being kind of the project manager to keep things moving along. And then as well as that is like, you know, creating revenue for his own business as well.
Absolutely. Nice.
The other thing that's really unique with Javi is that he's a great trainer. And so even with these steps, Javi actually picked up a couple workers from the refugee Freedom House. So they were refugees, and taught them some basic skill trade carpentry
Without
skills.
them being fluent in English.
Yes.
I'll say that too.
So, you know, I think that's, and again, that's part of that mentorship that gets passed on, that we're creating more skilled trade workers in the industry in unassuming places that you wouldn't expect, right?
Yep.
So I think there's many people out there that maybe just haven't been exposed to the trades, that now is the right time to do it because there's just so much work and there's just not enough workers.
Absolutely.
So down under here is pretty much like a big plastic tube.
Right.
So the gutter system runs down here, and it all goes into this, let's say like a silo. That's what this clean out here is for. So when it rains, instead of all the rainwater flooding Detroit's very old drainage system and flooding our streets, it'll be held in that container that we put in the ground.
Nice.
Until the ground around it dries up and it's ready to disperse the water over time instead of just immediately draining down to the sources.
So talk to
What I would also say is around that corrugated pipe that holds the water, there's engineered soil or engineered fill. And so different types of stone manage that water. And that water eventually, very quickly actually, I was surprised, the way that Hamp and Matthews Engineering explained it to us is that all water is meant to drain, but you have to just give it the space that it needs to and the time. And so if you can just contain so much of it, within a very short period of time, it'll disperse itself.
Nice.
And this is a small one, he said. said, this is a small compared to the bigger ones they've done.
So talk to me about the 3D print aspect of it.
That was Citizen Robotics. So they came out and pretty much just took measurements, came up with a design, and then they have a 3D printer, which is like cement, I believe. They print all these pavers out, and then they just number them. And then we just put a puzzle together out here.
It looks good, man. Luis,
Yeah,
could
so
you?
the process is very simple, but you know, we were just trying to figure out, because it's not been done a lot, especially with the specific 3D printer that Citizens Robotics uses. We were just trying to figure out, you know, everything that we do, it's great to show new ideas, but it's got to be cost effective, or it's got to be at least equal to what, you know, a normal product would be. At least that's what you want. But a lot of this is still R&D, so we may spend, you know, we may have spent a little bit more, but someone's got to start the process, right? The thing about these, what's good about these tanks is they handle enough water that you can put multiple properties on it. And so that's what's not really being done right now, especially in the commercial space. You know, you get a new building that goes up, they build this bioswell or retainage system, and you could probably put half the block on that, but we're not talking to one another to try to make that happen. So there's something I think that the city needs to do to try to get people together to talk about this more, because right now you can see that here's our stormwater system, but this thing is deteriorating. And so a big reason why we've had so much damage to this property over the years is that water from this sewage system or storm drain has been seeping in to the basement. And so it destroyed that whole wall. So we tore the whole wall out from the basement, dug it down 10 feet, redid the footing, redid the cinder block, and had to redo that whole foundation. But if we can keep this water out of that system, then we can avoid things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The same printer that did this, that's 3D printed too.
Oh wow, these steps here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
And the porch.
Now, did the 3D printer print these on site, or were they off-site printed?
They can print on site, but right now the way that they're set up is the machine and the robot is sitting in the middle of their warehouse, and they just print whatever they can.
Nice.
But if we can figure out how to get that thing onto a trailer, we could be going around doing, you know, 1-2 day repairs on people's properties all over town.
Nice.
So originally, when we went through the zoning process to try to get this to use as an office space, typically you have to have some type of commercial designation. And so this property just happened to be a block ice shop. And so that's what they were doing in this garage back in the horse and carriage days. Mm-hmm. And so it had a commercial designation in its history. So that's why they let us use the house under a residence or an office as a non-conforming use.
Nice.
But you can see it's a nice big garage, 30 by 25. We've got the doors where you can see boarded up where there's a mural on it, but that is going to be a glass door that rolls up and down. We've got enough space in there to do some classes, to put some tables and a projector screen, but also just create little opportunities for small projects. And so if we just want to teach some basic plumbing, basic electrical, basic heating and cooling, if we need to build a wall and put some product through it and show people some demonstrations, then that's a space that we could do that at.